So before we start, here are the colors that you need in this project. So for day 3, we are going to paint daisies, and I just love painting daisies. It's also a great way to add as a filler for your florals. I chose this as part of the challenge because the techniques that you will learn here can also be applied to flowers that look like a daisy. You just need to change the color. Okay, so let me show you a photo that I took during one of my trips. So you can see that if the daisy is facing us, facing front, you can see that the center is circle and the petals are fanning out. And if the daisy is facing at an angle, you will notice that the center is oval, and then of course the length of the petals are going to vary. Let's do a brief overview of the project before we start painting. So first we're going to paint the center of the flowers. So we're going to pinpoint where we're going to put them. And you'll notice that some of the centers here are circle, some are oval. And then next, while this is still wet, we're going to add some shadow. So this is raw umber, and I'm going to put it towards the edges. So you'll see that it's going to give it a little bit more depth. Alright, so for the petals of the daisies, we're going to use Payne's Gray. So this is one of the quickest ways to paint white flowers or white petals. Using a small brush, we're going to just paint a more elongated petal. And again, we're just going to vary the lengths and add some spaces in between the petals. Okay, and then we're going to add some sepia. This is going to be added towards the ring or the edges of the center. It's going to help make the daisies pop up even more. And of course, we're also going to add the stems and also the leaves. I'm going to add it in between the flowers. Alright, so when the flowers are already dry, we can also try to add another layer. So I'm using Payne's Gray and I'm just adding a few more of those petals on top. And right here, we're just adding some more finishing touches. If you want more depth, you can go back in with a darker color for the edge of that round center. Alright, so now let's start painting. And I'm going to grab first permanent yellow light. And then permanent yellow deep. So I just mixed those two colors because the permanent yellow light is too bright, too lemony. So we want it to be a little bit warm. Okay, so I'm just grabbing my pencil and we can just try to draw some circles, which will be our guide for the center of the daisies. So you can look at the reference photo and check out which flower stands out to you. It's also nice to vary the angles of the daisies in a composition so that it looks more interesting. So you'll notice some of the shapes here are circles, some are oval. Alright, so we are ready to paint. Let's just grab this yellow paint. So I'm just gonna fill in that circle. I'm using a small brush, so this is a size 4 round brush, but you can definitely use a size 6 as well. Alright, so let's just rinse our brush and grab a new color. This is raw umber. And I am also going to add it to the edges of this center. If you don't have raw umber, you can also add a little bit of brown to your yellow or maybe add some burnt sienna. So we just want to add some depth to the center of the daisies. So you can grab a tissue paper and dab your brush to absorb the excess moisture in your brush. So I'm doing this because I want to control that brown color. I don't want it to spread all over the place. I just want it to stay put around the edges. So if your brush is too wet, it's definitely going to move around on the surface of the paper. Okay, so let's prepare the color for the petals. I'm going to use Payne's Gray. And you can see that I'm adding a lot of water. We really want this to be very transparent. So I'm going to swatch it for you. So you'll see there that it's actually quite light. You almost can't see it. So we're going to try and paint some petals here. So I'm just going to drag my brush from the center going out. And I'm doing this quite fast to create some nice wispy strokes. Also try to vary the pressure in each petal so that you will end up with different brush markings. I'm also trying to leave a little bit of space in between some of the petals. And if you'll notice the reference photo, some of the petals have a more irregular shape, so we can also try to follow that. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I want to really dilute this color. Something I love to do when painting white flowers is that I add different colors to it. Sometimes I add purple, sometimes I add some blue in it, and it's going to make it look very pretty. So you'll notice that the blue is very, very subtle. Okay, so now let's move on to another flower. So this is on its side, so we want to also vary the length of the petals. So when you're doing a composition like this, it's best to vary the size of the flowers. So you'll notice here that the flower at the bottom, it's the biggest flower. And then the flowers in the middle, they're medium size. And at the top, it's going to be the smallest. And that's going to help distribute the weight in the floral composition. So I'm sharing these tips because you can also apply this to painting a floral composition using different flowers. Alright, so I think we can start adding some more depth. I'm going to use sepia. It's a dark brown color, and we are going to add that to the edges of the circle. So you can see that I dab my brush in tissue paper. That is to absorb the excess moisture. So the center is still a bit damp, and then the petals are a little bit wet. You can see that the brown color is spreading to the petals, and I think it looks great. So I love how the two colors are blending. If there are areas that you don't like, you can troubleshoot it by using a clean brush. Just blot it in a tissue paper and absorb the excess paint, just like what I'm doing here. And then dab your brush again in the tissue paper to clean your brush. Alright, so this is one of the ways to slightly erase some of the mistakes. Alright, so it's time to add the stems. Going to mix sap green and burnt umber. So we just want an earthy green color. Again, any green and any brown color can work well. So just make use of the colors that you have in your palette. I'm just going to add these long stems. And we can also add some small buds and also some smaller flowers. I feel like we need to add more variety in this composition. So I'm using a very light color. This is still Payne's Gray. So just dab your brush onto the paper to create some small markings. And I think we can add a little bit right here at the bottom just to fill in that space. We can add one more on the right side. You can see my hand is like moving and checking where I should add another small flower. So it really just takes practice to know where to put the flowers. You really need to paint a lot to understand the floral composition. So now I'm going to add some yellows in the center. You can see I did a reverse process. So I painted the petals first and then I added the center. So you can actually still do that as well. Alright, so for the leaves, we're going to use sap green and burnt umber again. And I'm just going to wiggle my brush to create some jagged edge for the leaves. And when you're adding leaves, it's always nice to add it near the white flowers because it's going to help shape the edges of the petals. It's going to make the flowers pop up as well. Alright, so while the leaves are still wet, I'm just going to quickly drop in a darker color just for some contrast. And that's going to create a beautiful effect. Let's just grab a little bit of sepia or dark brown color and add it in the center of the smaller flowers just to give it more contrast. Now for white flowers, I usually love adding a second layer. So this is just a shade or two darker than the previous color. If you don't want to add a second layer, that's fine. If you're happy with this look, it's also okay to leave it as is. So now I'm adding a second layer and I'm just painting these quick strokes, these elongated strokes on top of the first layer of petals. And it's going to help sort of separate some of the petals. Alright, let's grab some more paint. I'm just going to continue adding a second layer on the other flowers. So I try to do curved strokes. You can see that the strokes are a little bit bent. It's not a straight stroke all the time. That's because I want to add some movement to the petals. Okay, it's looking great, but I think we can add some more on the smaller flowers. So you can see that we're just painting a few strokes and it instantly makes the flowers pop up. So we can go back into the bigger flowers here. I'm going to add near the center where more shadow will occur. Alright, now let's grab a little bit of sepia and you can add it again in the center of the flower. So this is optional. If you feel like the colors are light, you can go back in and just add some more color. I also love how the brown color moves into the wet petals. It's giving it a more dramatic look. And again, if there are areas that you don't like, you simply grab a clean damp brush and just try to absorb the excess paint on the paper. Okay, so we're down to the finishing touches. I'm just gonna add a few more smaller flowers here. So just try to look at your painting from afar to see what else you need to add. Okay, so we're done with day 3. I hope that you enjoyed this project for today.